Doctor Who is really feeling like a washed up old rock star who just can't move on from the good old days. The show feels like it has two major problems since Russell T Davies returned. Like, it's so desperate to reference old characters and old stories and to bring back old actors. It's steeped in needing to provide niche fan service. And that sort of thing really feels like it's getting in the way of telling good, new, original stories and giving new characters the room and space they need to be as good as they can be. Like, Shuty's announcement as the Doctor felt so overshadowed by David Tennant and Catherine Tate coming back, didn't it? And then, spoiler alert for the finale, his departure feels so overshadowed by his regeneration into Billie Piper. It's like they just can't give Shuty his moment as the Doctor. And throughout his 2 seasons, there are so many moments where Mel will talk about her old adventures, where Kate will talk about her father. The Doctors will have flashes to his granddaughter. And even the big 2-season mystery around Mrs. Flood ended up being a callback to the Rani. And the 2 big finales centered around Sutekh and Omega, 2 classic Who villains. Which, by the way, a 2-season mystery culminating in Mrs. Flood being the Rani and then having a 2-episode arc of the Rani trying to bring back Omega, only for Omega to barely get half his torso through the door before being defeated and pushed back within 3 minutes. It was just so flat. But here's the thing, these callbacks and these references would be fine if they didn't get in the way of new and original stories and characters. If characters like Belinda were fleshed out and their stories were full, and the Rani was just a part of that story, that would be fine, but these characters just felt so half-developed. Like, we have a companion because we kind of have to, but the real story is about how clever these references are to the past Doctors and the past stories. And that brings me on to the second problem, which I've really struggled to put my finger on for a while. But then I saw a great TikTok the other day, and I can't find it now to find who made it, to credit them, so if you've seen it, if you know who made it, please tell me who it was so I can credit them. But it basically said that Doctor Who now is more concerned about moments that might go viral or spark online conversation, rather than compelling stories centered around compelling characters. And I feel like that's just so true. And it's why I've really struggled to cling to any aspect of these 2 seasons, to really connect to any of the companions. Like all the references to old classic Who, the cameos from old actors. Like the story isn't full of story beats taking you on a journey anymore. Instead, it's these big, isolated moments that you can imagine being clipped up and talked about online and put in headlines and have people make TikToks about. And these big moments just feel really messily knitted together. Instead of giving us a good, steady, character-driven story to build our relationships with Shuty's Doctor, or Ruby, or Belinda. Like, I think back to the 11th hour, and I think this episode was all about getting to know Eleven and Amy. And in 45 minutes, we know Matt Doctor. We know he's going to be kooky and eccentric, but also caring and thoughtful. And we know all about Amy and how her relationship with the Doctor and her imaginary friend is an extension of her childhood, her growing up in this village but longing for a bigger life. And we see that in her relationship with Rory and in her career and the way the other people in the village interact with her. From that single episode, I bought into them and their stories and their relationship. And it was a great foundation for everything else that came later. But I just don't feel like anything in these 2 seasons has come close to giving me that feeling for Shuty or either of the companions. Because their stories are so caught up in the past, in these references and in these moments, that it doesn't actually give them character beats. And so the characters don't have room to thrive. They aren't able to stand alone as characters or as duos. You know, Ruby and Shuty calling each other best friends at the end of season 1. Are they? I felt none of that watching their season. Also, the irony of calling it season 1 as though it's a fresh start, but then being full of these references to past versions of the show. And look, here's the thing. I loved watching Shuty on screen, but his Doctor just didn't feel like he had any big moments to truly shine, to cement himself as the Doctor. Like, he's great at shedding a single tear. He's clearly charming and charismatic. And he was great in these one-on-one moments with certain characters where he shows love and he shows empathy. But you know those big moments where the Doctor monologues and the music swells and you get goosebumps and you see this is the Doctor? I don't feel like we had a moment like that for Shuty. And it's really not because of his performance. He was great. I think it's the writing. And also, I'm not saying this as though it's a good or a bad thing. I offer it without conclusion. I saw on Twitter that apparently Shuty is the first Doctor never to encounter any of the Daleks, the Cybermen, or the Master. Which, like, I feel like if his stories felt more complete anyway, it wouldn't feel like he missed out. But I've come away from Shuty's run now feeling like I wanted more from him, you know, or more for him. But look, I don't want to just sit here and be completely negative and complain. I do think the second season was better than the first. I feel like Lucky Day might be my favourite episode about Ruby. The Well, the Midnight sequel, was fantastic. fantastic. Like, I know that's a callback and I've just complained about all the callbacks, but the nature of the Midnight Entity kind of forces the story to center around the characters and give you these big character moments, right? That story embodied what I think the rest of the 2 seasons was missing. Build characters, flesh out who they are and why they make the decisions they make, and then put them in these situations and see what it does to them as characters. I also liked Comrade as a secondary antagonist. Like, I feel like he had a backstory. He had relatable motivations. Not relatable to me, but like relatable in life, you know, that pipeline, people being radicalized like that. So what do I want from the future of Doctor Who? I understand in the Chibnall era, they maybe lost quite a lot of viewers, so they wanted to put it back in familiar hands. They probably considered them safe hands with Russell T Davies. But I think I want someone fresh and young and exciting to run the show with new ideas. Take it in a new direction that is forward thinking rather than being stuck looking back on what the show used to be.